So I owe him quite a bit. So thank you, John. And a quick logistic on this presentation. If you have questions during the presentations, we have a chat box. You can just put your question in the chat box. And then when we get to the Q&A portion of our presentation, I will read as many of those questions as I can to John, and we'll get our answers. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my good friend, John Sarver, and take it away.
Thank you, John. And, you know, if you can't hear me for some reason, just put a note in the chat box. But I'd like to thank East Lansing Public Library and Michigan Energy Options for hosting this presentation on solar basics for homeowners. And, you know, hopefully we'll be able to get to all your questions at the end of the presentation. But if you still have other questions, as you maybe pursue solar options, feel free to email me at johnsarver3@gmail.com. Next. Yeah, today's talk, I'm going to talk about some solar basics, some things to consider when you're considering thinking about buying a solar system, and some resources that are available to you. That picture actually is of the solar array on the west side of Lansing that's provides power to the Lansing Board of Water and Light. Next. Solar does work here. Some days when it's cloudy, you start wondering. Actually, I don't know about the rest of you, but I just had a little snow here in East Lansing. So yeah, this is Michigan, anything's possible. As you can see by this chart, Michigan may not be the best state for solar, but certainly we're not the worst either. As you can see that if you have the same solar system in Arizona, obviously you're going to produce more power. But the solar system in Michigan is going to produce more power than New Jersey or Germany. And as probably a lot of you know, Germany has a lot of solar. I put the example on the bottom just to kind of give a comparison. A 1 kilowatt system in Lansing produces about 80% of the power that would be produced in Miami, Florida. So it does work here. And of course, it really determines whether it happens here or not is the economics, usually for most folks, but also there's a lot of good environmental reasons for going solar. Next. Well, why solar energy? There's a number of good reasons. One, it can be done anywhere in Michigan. You know, wind power, which is very a major source of renewable energy here in Michigan now, is very site specific. We've got a lot of wind turbines out in the thumb. But solar basically can be done anywhere in Michigan, and it's power where it's needed. There's no line losses. You know, when you're getting your power from a central power station and the power is transmitted to your home or business, there are line losses along the way. The other thing is you're producing power a lot of times when it's really needed. Think in terms of a hot, sunny August day, air conditioning load is high, and that's a time when, you know, typically there's peak electric use. And that's also the time when our solar power systems are producing power at peak times too. So it's a nice match. Solar power has low maintenance, which is a real plus. They last a long time, 25 or more years. And of course, climate change is a major motivator for, I think, a lot of us, because doing renewable energy and using renewable energy to replace fossil fuels is one of the things that is always on the list to deal with climate change. Next. Well, solar prices have gone down significantly during the past 10 years. If you focus in on the residential on the left side of this chart, you can see back in 2000, solar panels, solar systems were going for $12 a watt. And now we're down all the way to, in this chart, to $3.70 a watt. I think a number of systems, at least in the Lansing area, are coming in at around $3 per watt. So it's been a significant decrease, which is, and that's one reason we are starting to see solar systems in our neighborhoods, on our schools, on our municipal buildings, and in commercial buildings too. Next. This is just an example of the economics. You know, a typical system on a home might be 4 kilowatts or 4,000 watts. I'm just using the $3 per watt price as an example. It might cost somebody less or a little more. So you end up with a total installed cost of $12,000. We still have a federal tax credit. Last year we had a 30% federal tax credit, this year 26%, next year 22%, and the year after nothing for homeowners. So this is a good year to think about solar, and as you can see, your cost of $12,000 now is under $9,000. And I've done an estimate there for your energy savings and calculated your cost savings. So you would be expected to save about $785 a year and pay for your system in 11 years. So it's a large investment, it's a long-term investment, but it's a very good investment. You know, if you have money in your savings account or checking account, you know that you're not going to get that sort of return. So next. Well, a lot of the solar systems are rooftop, and you know, the two big issues obviously are you want a southern orientation as much as possible. You want minimum or no shading. A lot of times it's really the only option because a lot of us homeowners have smaller lots. Now the two systems on the right are about 4 kilowatt systems, which is kind of a typical size for you know, a typical home, I think. The owner of the system on the bottom there, I asked him, gee, how much of your power is the 4 kilowatt system providing? And David told me it was 80% for him. And obviously that varies a lot depending on how much electricity you have and whether your kids use a lot of power. Now, when we're talking about solar on roof, the issue always comes up, boy, what if I have to re-roof? Because actually the picture on the bottom is the first solar system that I purchased back in 2010. And it's a roof integrated system. And what ended up happening with me is my shingles were over 20 years old. And this company is actually a roofing company in addition to a solar company. So I basically hired them to replace all my shingles and put in that roof integrated system. As you can see, it's right on the roof decking. But for a lot of people, it's not going to be that convenient. And you know, you may have another 15 years on your shingles. You put in a solar system, it's going to last 25, 30 years. You know, at some point you're going to replace your shingles, and you basically just hire somebody to take off the system and put it back on and connect it again. Now, I did ask a couple, and I didn't do a big survey or anything. I asked a couple solar installers, how much would you charge for doing that? One person said $500, another said $1,000, and you know, who knows? Because at least my experience with home projects, the cost can be almost anything, and the range is always significant. Roof integrated, I was real happy with my system because I like the look of it. That was the primary reason I liked it. It does have the disadvantage that it's not at the optimum angle. The rule of thumb for the optimum angle is that you're at your latitude, which around here is what, 43 degrees. The other disadvantage is that solar power systems work better actually with cooler temperatures. And if you have your array elevated a little off the roof, like the two to the right, you actually get some cooling event effect from the circulation. So that's a disadvantage too. Now, one thing I'll mention too is that I recently installed a second system, which is the more traditional systems you see on the right. My first system had a central inverter and a string inverter. And, you know, at the time, there's a big pine tree to the right. I thought the tree was mature, but it kept growing. And so I do have some shading issues. And one of the disadvantages with a central inverter is that if any part of the array is shaded, then it actually can affect the production from the rest of the panels. Now, the new system I have is got micro inverters. And so there's small inverters connected with every panel or every 2 panels. And that kind of eliminates that concern about shading issues, because the micro inverters make it possible to maintain the production and kind of ignore the fact that maybe the panel 2 over is being shaded. Now, there are also optimizers which perform the same function and are attached to panels. And they basically help manage the system and help you deal with any shading issues. Optimizer is associated with the central inverter. Now, the inverter, and I don't know if I mentioned this, is converting your DC power created by your panels into the AC that you need for your home. Next. Now, there are ground mount systems. Typically, if you have a big enough yard, you can have a bigger system than maybe you can put on your roof. You can brush off snow. I don't go up on my roof in the winter, so I do lose some electric production when we do get some snow. One of the advantages with ground mount systems too is you can do seasonal tilting, so that you can have the right angle for whether you're in a winter season or a summer season. And you can also do tracking, basically tracking the sun from east to west. Now, the systems you see to the right there on the poles, they lend themselves to a tracking system. The one up in the top there is an interesting system. That's an installation, that's a sunflower at the Detroit Zoo. And that system actually kind of folds up and goes into the pedestal. In the morning, it kind of, the sun hits it and it kind of unfolds, and then it tracks the sun during the day. And then at the end of the day, it kind of folds up and goes back into the pedestal. It's really kind of very neat and very different. And of course, you know, on a watt basis, it costs more. Next. Now, an on-grid system is your typical system these days. You have, I have a wind turbine there, but it could be, of course, a solar system. You have that inverter that's converting your DC to AC. Most of your power is being used by your home, but if you do have excess power, maybe in the spring, summer, you know, the excess electrons are put on the grid and go to your neighbor next door. And then the utility will, through a program called net metering, give you a bill credit. Next. Back in the good old days, I'm talking about 1970s, 1980s, when I first started off in this area, this business, really most of the systems, solar systems, were very expensive. And so, you know, you might have a cabin in the woods and it would cost you thousands of dollars to hook up to the electric lines. And so what made more sense was to buy a small solar system and sometimes do a small wind system, because the production complemented each other on both a daily and a seasonal basis. And of course you had batteries, and then sometimes you had a backup generator. But when the prices of the solar system started going down and people who were already connected to the grid started buying them, you know, installers basically eliminated the battery bank. You didn't need it, and it reduced costs significantly. Next. Well, batteries are making a comeback. The most popular ones are lithium ion. So you may have heard of the Tesla Powerwall, and LG Chem also makes batteries. Of course, there's the lead acid batteries, which have been around for a long time, and they have a low power density, which is a disadvantage. Now, and there are new types of batteries like flow batteries. They basically act like a fuel cell, and the electrolyte spent in the fuel kind of goes through flows through the battery, and then you either recharge it or add new electrolyte. that chart kind of tells you that on a national basis, or maybe even more than national, there's an expectation that, 2035 or sometime thereafter, a lot of the solar systems, more of the solar systems will be paired with batteries. Now that's particularly attractive to places like California, where you have those forest fires, and basically they're having outages just to kind of deal with the forest fires. In Michigan, you don't have much of an economic case yet for batteries. Now, having said that though, if you're in a situation where you get outages of a decent period of time, multiple days or frequently, a battery system might be worth your while. The other place where it kind of makes some sense is if we have more time of use rates. Time of use rates charge you a different rate during peak times during the day than in like at the night. And if you had batteries, you can kind of move around when you consume power to kind of pay at the cheaper rate. So batteries are definitely coming, and we're starting to see installations here in Michigan. Next. Let me just say a little more about net metering. Again, that's where we provide excess electricity to the utility that we have, that we produced. You can get a bill credit each month. Basically, systems are sized to usage. Now, usage over the entire year, but this is not a program for you to become a utility or a power producer. That's not the point of this kind of program. It's basically you size the system to what you would use, and you kind of balance it over the course of a year. Your system has to be 20 kilowatts or less to get the retail rate credit. And like I showed you before, an example of a 4 kilowatt system. So 20 kilowatts is plenty big for almost all residential systems. Now, if you wanted to have a bigger system, up to 150 kilowatts, you still can get a credit, but it's at more of a wholesale rate, or what is considered a generation rate. Now, actually, net metering is being replaced by a new distributed generation tariff. Next slide. A lot of us, I think, probably on this program are consumers' energy customers. DTE has already had a distributed generation tariff approved by the state of Michigan, the Public Service Commission. The outflow rate, or the rate that is used to calculate your bill credit for DTE, is about half of the retail rate now. Now, Consumers Energy doesn't have a distributed generation tariff yet that's been approved. They just filed a rate case with the state of Michigan. We don't really know what the outflow rate will be. Consumers Energy would like it similar to what was approved for DTE. A lot of interveners, including Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, doesn't think that's fair, and we've intervened in the case. But it's probably safe to assume that whatever the rate ends up being, it'll be less than net metering, which gets us to the fact that this is another good reason why this is a good year to go solar. If you actually install before there's a new distributed generation tariff from Consumers Energy, you can be grandfathered into the existing program for 10 years and get that retail rate credit. Next. Last time I checked, Lansing Board of Water and Light still had a net metering program. And they also had a PV incentive, which is very unusual for a utility. Again, last time I checked, it was $500 per kilowatt. So if you think in terms of that 4 kilowatt system I showed you a picture of before, you'd get the maximum credit of $2,000, which can make a significant help with the economics again. Next. There's a program called PV Watts, which comes from the National Renewable Energy Lab and can be very helpful to kind of get an idea of what you're talking about for your particular house. You can find it by just Googling PV Watts. You go in and you put in your address. They find the local weather station. You can zoom in on your house, and you basically, you put some squares down there, and it kind of draws your PV system, and you could do this in the backyard also. So in this case, it basically indicated in that part of the roof, we could have a 2.3 kilowatt system, and it gives you the production month by month. Your consumer's energy bill, the one I get, shows a chart which has your monthly use for the past 12 months. And so you can take your utility bill from consumers and compares it this information and get an idea how big a system could you have on your roof, how much of the power that you consume would it provide. Next. The Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association is a resource. We do have a business directory. On the business directory, we have 26 solar installers. We're an advocate for state and local policies to promote renewable energy. And if anybody would like to join and kind of support our advocacy efforts, of course, would love it. You can do that online at glrea.org. I produce a monthly newsletter on renewable energy with a focus on Michigan. If you'd like to receive that, you'll get it automatically if you're a member, but also you can just send me an email at johnsarver3@gmail.com. And also I facilitate something called the Michigan Solar Users Network, which is an informal network of solar owners and future solar owners. We have a Facebook group, and you see the link there. We've got about 629 members now, some looking to buy solar systems, some having solar systems, and it's a nice exchange of information. Next. Also in the Lansing area, we started a Solar Energy Advisors program. 3 of us homeowners who have solar systems, none of us work for solar installers, have volunteered to advise anybody who's interested by either phone or email. And if you want, you can come out to our house. You see the 3 homes there and check out our systems. This is just to kind of help you as you kind of move along and this explore kind of what your options are. So if you're interested in that, again, just email me at johnsarver3@gmail.com. Next. Community solar is a good option for folks who don't have a good site. Maybe there's shading or orientation issues. Maybe you're a renter. It's basically the concept that you have multiple shareholders who basically have a share of a central array, and they receive a bill credit based on the production of their panel or panels. We have one right down the street in Bircham Park, down my street. I'm on Bircham Drive. And it's a smaller expense than owning your own system. That system, you could get a panel lease a panel for 25 years for $399. And so you can get a little solar. And that's a website which will connect you to basically Michigan Energy Options, who's managing the program. And Consumers Energy also has a program, but the economics are not as good. Next. Well, this is my last slide. It's a good time to go solar. Solar system prices are low now. Net metering still exists for Consumers Energy customers. There's still the federal tax credit. There's no property taxes. This was recently fixed last year with state legislation. So if you buy a solar system, your assessment won't go up. Now, what will most likely happen, though, is when you sell the property, because your solar system has value, it would be reflected in your sale price. And so the new owner would probably end up having higher property taxes because they ended up paying more for the house that they bought from you. And like I said before, this is a really good investment. And of course, climate emergency basically is telling us that whatever we can do to kind of reduce our use of fossil fuels is absolutely essential. I'm going to turn it over now to Pat O'Boyle, who's with Michigan Saves, who's going to talk just a little about their program. I used a home equity loan when I purchased my system, but that isn't always a good option for folks. And Michigan Saves is a good alternative that you may want to look at for financing your system. I think Pat's in the process of getting unmuted, hopefully.
Hello, everyone. Well, thank you very much, John Sarver and John Kinch, for having this ability to speak with you guys real quick. It looks like we have a really good turnout. So I'll kind of just run through the Michigan Saves program. I did take some notes while Mr. Sarver was talking about his program because I had over-calculated my numbers a bit for this presentation. So I wanted to be able to provide some real-world numbers so individuals out there seeking financing might be able to see what it would look like to them. If you can go to that next slide, please. Okay, so Michigan Saves functions as a nonprofit green bank that was established in 2009 with grant funding from the Michigan Public Service Commission and the Department of Energy. That money resides in what we coined a loan loss reserve, which acts as essentially loan insurance to private lenders. On the residential end is what I'll focus on. Credit unions are able to loan their money at below market rates due to having the loan loss reserve backing those. We have a group of authorized contractors. We have about 580, I believe, unique contractors in the program at this time between the residential and commercial program, and have about, we also have, just like GLREA, somewhere in the neighborhoods of 20 to 25 solar installers currently in the program. We also do energy efficiency measures like a high efficiency furnace, new windows, or similar that we can also finance for. And you can go to that next slide, please. This is the nuts and bolts, and this is actually, I had this updated just the other day for us because the rates, as the rates have come down in the US economy, we have also seen that happen to our lenders in our program. We have 6 lenders in our program, of which 3 of them can do the entire state of Michigan. And right here in the Lansing area, I'm also in Lansing, is LAFQ, Michigan State Federal Credit Union, and then also Genesis Credit Union and Lake Michigan Credit Union can service our area. And this is the nuts and the bolts. It's as low as 4.44% and up to 5.9 based on how long you take those loans. If you can go to that next slide for me, please. This is a good overview that we, again, just put together as of the end of February this year. What you'll notice here, though, on this slide is the average system size that we have seen is much larger than what John talked about. And I don't have a good answer for why that would be, other than I would assume people that are financing these projects are the larger projects. And then this number down below, it also hits on what John had mentioned, that the average cost per watt, so our program has been in place for 10 years, the average cost per watt is now down to $3.16 in the last 2 years, which is down 8 cents per watt of what we had seen program-wide. These are pretty competitive numbers that we're happy to see our contractors are able to provide these systems. I did a little quick math before our conversation. So Genesis is able to offer 4.44% loans for 120 months. And I ran it on this average project size here, which is 22,818. Your average monthly payment on that today would be $235 a month. If we stretch it out to a 15-year term, which is available from some of our lenders, they do increase the rate slightly to 5.2%. That project at the same $22,818 would cost roughly $182 a month. And then what John had mentioned about the 4 kilowatt system. So if you cut those two numbers essentially in half, the 10-year term or 120-month loan would be $117 a month for a 4 kilowatt system. And on that 15-year term, you'd be looking at $91 a month. So that gives you a little comparison that you can do to potentially your electric bill. If you want to jump to that next slide. This is another program improvement that we made in the past year and a half, where many of our lenders will allow you to re-amortize your monthly payment once you receive, if you are eligible for your federal tax credits. You take the original loan for the full, let's just say the $22,000 amount. When you get your 26% federal tax credit next year, you can apply that one time free of charge, and the lender will recalculate your monthly payments based on that new principal without affecting your rate or term. So that's been something that was a creative way that our lenders are able to help out to maximize that tax return. We also have this link right here, and I believe this can be made available to everyone. It's a good to essentially vet your solar contractor, and we always suggest getting a couple quotes from different contractors when you're looking into this. Excuse me. We have kind of a little guide that our team came up with and used GLREA as a resource, and also some of our solar installers as a resource of questions you should ask a solar installer before signing on the dotted line. It's a good just reference guide. It's a quick, couple page read, and it's been a good resource for us, the residents of Michigan. Next slide, please. And then this is the Michigan Saves, our current portfolio. Again, all of this financing has been done in the state of Michigan. We just passed the $237 million at the end of February, so hoping that into March, when we get those numbers, we'll cross the $240 million. And this is just a synopsis of what the savings have looked like during the program, since the program's inception. And then right at the bottom is our big goal of $1 billion in energy improvements in the state of Michigan. And I hope to see that number. Next slide. This is our team right here. We actually have one more guy that didn't make the cut because his picture's not quite ready, but this is us. Please feel free. MichiganSaves.org is our website. You can find my contact on there as well. Feel free. I mean, GLREA, Michigan Energy Options, Michigan Saves. If you're considering these projects, reach out to the people who are local here, and we're happy to help out. So I can kind of wrap up there. I'm going to definitely stick online to see if there's any questions I can help with.
Hey, thank you, Pat. This is John Kent. I look forward to seeing you in person again sometime soon, I hope. And Thank you, John Sarver, for your presentation. John, of course, was astute. He makes really complicated things simple. But I also really want to encourage folks in the chat box to ask some questions of both of these presenters tonight. Let me grab one question that's already there. John Sarver, you're welcome to take this, and I can come in behind you and help you out if you need it. One of our attendees asks that the understanding she has about community solar is that you can't cross property lines in Michigan, and that bills in Lansing could perhaps fix this. So there's a little distinction there between what community solar is versus what she's perhaps talking about here. Do you want to take into that?
Yeah, and then maybe John, you could add to it.
Okay.
Community solar is really you typically would have an array serving one customer. It usually is a utility, like the Bircham Park project down the street from me here. All the the power is provided to the Lansing Board of Water and Light. But you could have a project, let's say on a church, and all the power would be provided to the church, but then different individuals might have a share of that project. Now, at the present time, it works best if the utility is the sponsor, because then you can get that credit on your utility bill. Obviously, that's not something that a church can do. And so we do have a number of utilities in the state kind of doing community solar projects. I think the one done by the Lansing Board of Water and Light is really one of the best. John, would you like to add something to that?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and I think that's a good point to make, is that we are fortunate in East Lansing to have the Lansing Board of Water and Light, a municipal utility, as our partner in this project, and they're willing to be the off-taker of the power. So they're willing to purchase the power from the East Lansing Community Solar Park. So they're getting all the power. But what they're doing then is essentially kind of monetizing the percentage of the project that various individuals have, so that they get an on-bill credit. That return mechanism is very key. If you have a utility that isn't willing to do an on-bill credit for a community solar park, that project is relatively dead on arrival. So that was a key piece of this to work that out. And so we can't thank BWL enough for their support in this project. It was a long time kind of coming to work out. And I will say that there are some other innovative kind of ways that people are working on developing the model for community solar parks. So ideally, we'll see even more of these happen in the state of Michigan. We're currently full up with our project. We have something like 150 participants overall, and those include churches, include City of East Lansing, and includes various businesses, but an awful lot of individuals have leased one or two panels, which is really kind of what the idea of community solar is all about. We hope to build future projects. We've already got kind of a backlist of people wanting to see more in the Lansing area, so stay tuned.
Yeah, it should be mentioned too, this is John Sarver again, if there is legislation that's been introduced which would kind of provide more opportunities for community solar, more opportunities for nonprofits and local governments to be sponsors, and basically require utilities to kind of work with other organizations to do community solar projects, some, you know, in just a variety of ways. So if anybody wants any more information about that, just email me. The legislation hasn't gone anywhere yet, but we can always be hopeful, and I was glad it was introduced.
Yeah, and I would just say one more thing to that is that we have, 83 counties in the state of Michigan and 65 utilities. And there's 65 opinions out there about solar, depending where your utility is. So again, just depends, where you kind of happen to be located in the state of Michigan. And we have a really good question here for Pat regarding Michigan Saves. The question is, do you provide loans for batteries along with solar panels?
Yes, we can do batteries combined with the system, or actually we can come back in after the system has been installed. So someone that's had a system for 5, 8 years, 10 years. As well as on the front end, we can do an add-on generator. If somebody is trying to do that as well, we can't do that on the back end. And we've seen a large influx since approximately when DTE removed their net metering agreement. We really saw a spike from that point forward of creative ways to set up the system, maximizing the battery usage. So yes, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, so Pat led us in a particular direction that I want to follow up with John. And the idea that with the distributed generation tariff, the inflow-outflow model, and the fact that it's not as lucrative for homeowners to overproduce and get a net metering credit like they used to in the past, one of the perhaps solutions to that for the homeowner would be a battery and just keeping it behind the meter. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, that's a good thought, basically, because because the outflow rate for DTE is now half the retail rate. A solar owner in the DTE service territory may find it advantageous to have batteries, so they can basically, rather than have any excess power at all, basically kind of take the excess power and rather than give it to DTE, put it in the batteries and then use it at night. And basically you would end up then with the batteries basically getting the full value of the retail rate because you'd be using it all on site. And the other thing that will change the economics with the batteries, of course, will be time of use rates, which I think are coming probably fairly soon, where, you know, again, there'll be higher rates at peak times, and folks with batteries will be able to kind of shift around when they have to consume electricity from their utility.
Right, absolutely. There's a question here about two-sided solar panels or bifacial solar panels. John, you want to talk about the economics of that new technology and what it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a fairly recent development, at least on a commercial scale. And, you know, I don't really know how much more they cost and how much more you save. But I'm glad you brought that up, John, because that's a question. If you're shopping around for a solar system, it's a question you want to ask one of those three or solar installers who gave you proposals. Do they have those types of panels? Basically, because of reflection, you're getting power from both sides of the panel. And, you know, when you think about snow in the winter and just light bouncing around, you're producing more power by having basically two sides to your panel. Now, obviously, you're not getting as much power from the backside, but even so, I don't have enough experience to know how favorable the economics are. But that's a good thing if you're looking at different proposals to ask your solar installers or potential solar installer. This is, as we've talked about, a big investment. So, you know, you want to ask a lot of questions and ask about different options. There are premium panels, and typically they're used in situations where you don't have a lot of space. But a lot of times solar installers will just basically say, rather than give you a premium panel, we'll just give you an extra panel and it'll actually be cheaper. Well, maybe that's true, maybe not. I don't know. Again, it's something that when you look at three proposals, and you'll see you probably have different panels proposed, just kind of ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, let me add to that is that I think one of the applications for bifacial that is promising is on flat roof buildings, especially where you have a white roof. So, and white roofs are a good idea because they help reflect the sun. So you're lowering the energy costs, the cooling costs of a flat roof building. And they're good in the sense of if you're constrained by space as to how much solar can get on a particular location. And lastly, just to give you an idea of the efficiency of panels and how much that has improved over time, the panels that we put on Michigan Energy Options as we were getting our LEED Platinum certification they were about the best we could get our hands on. That was about 7 years ago. Were I think 240 watt panels. The panels we ended up putting into our community solar park were 45 watt panels. 400 watt panels are pretty common now in the marketplace. We're probably going to push up against 500 watt panels, and the panel footprint is the same. So it's about 3.5 by 5.5 feet. So if you think about that, you know, the idea of perhaps with a roof being constrained, you might be able to get twice as much power from solar on that roof as you would have 10 years ago. Let's see, another question in the box. Anybody have any additional questions? John, do you want to follow up on anything you were talking about to begin with that maybe you wanted to put a finer point on? It can come to mind.
Well, one thing I'll make a point of, and this is probably obvious to a lot of folks on the participating tonight, is there can be, like I was using a 4 kilowatt example, and Pat talked about the average size being 8 kilowatts. Of course, some of that has to do with some homes are bigger than others, but something that's always important to emphasize is your best thing you can do, of course, is energy efficiency first. And that can make a big difference in the size of the system that you actually need for your house. So that's the first thing you want to look at is, is your air conditioner and your refrigerator as efficient as possible? Have you replaced all your lights with LED lights? I'm infamous in my family for turning lights off. That's, of course, very cost effective.
Yeah.
Walking around and just turning things out.
I know.
But
A megawatt.
it is interesting when you get into this. Solar is really very neat. I'll have to say it's kind of very. People say it's sexy. It is very visible, and I love it because it's a very visible sign of the transition we're making to renewable energy, and it's a very visible sign that what you're doing is marvelous as a solar owner. But we should never forget all those efficiency things. Some more expensive and some no cost at all that should be done really before you get a solar system.
Right. So efficiency first. Michigan Energy Options has been around for 42 years. For most of its life, it was known as Urban Options. So we did mostly energy efficiency work. But solar has become that kind of shiny bauble that gets people's attention. So we're always happy to talk to people about solar. And then we ask them the question about, have they had any kind of energy audit of their building? Are they doing those kind of conservation measures? And by the way, most, if not all, utilities in the state of Michigan offer a lot of incentives and rebates for both business owners and residents to take advantage of energy efficiency upgrades. And so you should be doing that if you haven't done that yet. And then you can look at the shiny bauble of adding solar to your operation. So I got a question here. I'm asking, is it cost effective in Lansing area to install a unit where you can vary the pitch for increased solar generation? So we're getting at that idea, whether it's fixed axis, John, or whether it's dual axis, and whether all those kinds of little incremental punches you get from solar. And is it worth doing that?
Well, definitely if you have a ground mount system, it's worth it to do the seasonal tilt because basically that's just 2 or 3 times a year you get it out there and adjusting the angles, and you can obviously increase your production by having the better angle. When we get into the tracking systems, which allow you to track from east to west during the day, that's something to kind of talk to your potential installers about, because recently I've heard that the economics have become favorable.
Right.
It gets back to the issue too that John mentioned too. Depending on your space, if you have some restrictions on space, you may want to for sure look into a tracking system, because you'll be able to obviously increase your production, maybe with your limited space. And one thing I'll mention too, my last slide was talking about it's a good year to go solar for a number of reasons. Consumers Energy is going to be having a distributed generation tariff by the end of the year, the 26% federal tax credit. If you are thinking about a solar system, actually, this is a good time to contact some solar installers and start talking to them. And I tell you why. They can't now, because of the pandemic, go out and do any installation work. They can kind of talk to people over the phone, use Zoom to kind of talk to you, use drones to kind of look at your roof. And they basically can kind of, you can go through the process of getting proposals and kind of deciding which way you want to go. Once things start hopping, basically solar installers are going to be super busy.
Right.
So basically, if you're thinking about waiting for July or August to start contacting solar installers, I think basically that would be too late because of the kind of special circumstances, because of the crisis we're in.
I agree. Am I wrong that the Delta solar field that BWL has, that is a tracker on that? Do you know, John?
It does have a tracking system, right?
So I thought, yeah, right. Yeah. Indeed. Okay. And
that does tell you something, that they
Yeah.
decided that it was worthwhile
Right.
to make that extra investment in the tracking equipment.
Yeah, some of this too, by the way, is kind of economies of scale, right? I mean, a utility scale project like that, trackers might make sense. If you've got 4 panels in the backyard, I don't know. You'd have to
Exactly. Right.
decide that for yourself.
Right.
Steve Potter makes a point here, and I just want to read what he wrote verbatim in the chat box. He writes, make sure anyone who wants to be grandfathered under the current net metering agreement must have submitted an application to consumers and approved first before the rate case is settled. So there's a bit of paperwork that has to happen before you get grandfathered in. So while John mentioned that the rate case is likely to be settled in the fall, there's some work you need to be doing ahead of time if you want to make that deadline, is what I believe Steve is telling us.
That's right. That's an excellent point. And your solar installers will work with you and basically submit your interconnection agreement to the utility for you and in partnership with you. So that's that's a good point. It's you can't wait to the last minute.
Right. So if we were in a room together in East Lansing Library, except for where we are now tonight, I would ask people like, how many of you have solar installations on your properties? How many of you would like to have solar installations on your property? And I don't believe we can do that except for like a show of hands, which is some little gizmo here on Zoom. But any sense, John, of how much more uptick we're seeing in the residential space in Michigan? It seems like when I'm moving around, I see solar far more often than I used to.
Oh yeah, we did a program, and I'm just thinking of where I live in Meridian Township, and we did some workshops in 2018, and literally doubled the number of solar installations. We had 19 new installations in the township in that 1 year, and they're continuing. There are more and more installations. I think because people are starting to realize, they look around and they see them that they're installed. They talk to their neighbors. They find out that they're working fine. They hear about the fact that there are tax credits and they're going to be phased out. But I think people are getting much more comfortable with the ideas now because they're looking around and they're seeing solar on homes in the township buildings, schools, and it's just a matter of being, I think, comfortable with the technology.
Well, yeah, and I also think Pat's numbers certainly support how quickly people are adopting this and going solar. Wouldn't you say that, Pat? Well, you might be muted. Sorry, Pat. Forgot. Pat's nodding his head somewhere out there in the.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Actually, I talked with 2 different solar installers today, and we had 11 loan applications today. I was kind of keeping up on this. 3 of them were actually solar projects that are being booked for the future. So when John said that, it's extremely accurate that they are going through and doing virtual presentations to customers and getting their pipeline set up for when they're allowed to do that is absolutely, we're seeing more and more, and same with the batteries as well. And yeah, that system over in Delta is a single access tracker, and they actually have the motors set up that they have a little mini side panel that runs the motors as to not take away from their energy production.
Interesting. I'm going to just read a few of these questions real quick. One of the questions is does Leroy Harvey, who many of us know, continue to show his home, John, I guess, as part of the solar home tour? I guess that's a quick yes or no.
Are you talking about my house?
No, Leroy's house.
Oh, Leroy's house. Oh, well, yeah, we'd like, now we're not too sure how the solar home tour is going to go. Traditionally, it's the first weekend in October, but with the pandemic, just don't know what's going to be happening. But yeah, we love to host solar owners to kind of talk to other potential solar owners. and get a chance to check out systems and ask a lot of questions. So yeah,
Okay.
the more the better.
Yeah, right. I'm going to give you a choice of three to answer here, John. One is a question about, say something about the 2% cap and the legislation to remove it that's in progress. And then another one says that I'm working with a group of folks in Ann Arbor, like a group buy kind of residential approach to solar called a solarized program. And just saying, if anybody's interested, please contact her. Her name is Julie Roth through the Office of Sustainability and Innovations in Ann Arbor. We all know Misty. I think Misty's wonderful. And then there's a question here. Are there limits to the cost that will qualify for the 26% tax credit? Why don't you grab that one first?
Oh, there's no cost limit, no. And the tax credit can be, if you can't use the whole tax credit in 1 year, it can be forwarded.
You can forward it for 5 years, can't you?
Yeah, I forget that sounds right.
About 45. What about this issue about whether or not you can pay for a roof out of that tax credit?
Well, that's
because you need a new roof because you're putting solar on it.
Yeah, that's a little more of a gray area.
Yeah.
Consult with your tax accountant because there's definitely a possibility there, but how much you could claim, I'm no tax expert.
And I will say this brings another piece of mind. Again, the point that we have many utilities in the state of Michigan, and oftentimes you might have an electric utility that's a cooperative, and you might have the gas part of that be consumers or DTE, for example. You can't probably start too early if you're thinking about doing some kind of a big solar project as like a business, for example, is beginning to engage your utility in that conversation. You can count on your solar installer developer to have that, but I think you should also take those reins a little bit because you don't want any surprises in a project in which you've already invested some time and effort and find out that for whatever reason it might not work. So talk to your utility, let them know what you're thinking about doing. Hey, Melissa, you're going to say you're going to join us on a question or something? You there?
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Thank you. I just wanted to let folks know if you'd like to see or if you'd like to receive a recording of this conversation, of this presentation, you can email the City of East Lansing. It'll be A Moreno, MORENO at City of East Lansing. Once again, that's AMORENO at City of East Lansing. Can also
and is it a .com? Melissa, is it .com or .org or .gov?
Good question. Let me look.
I think they're .com for some reason, even though they're .gov.
Yeah, Angelo, maybe you can. Oh, okay. .com.
Yeah,
Sorry about
.com.
that. And then
No
also
worries.
just keep an eye out on the library's website and social media because they plan to share the URL for the recording as well. So I want to share that with folks.
And again, I can share Julie Roth's information, I guess, somehow regarding what they're trying to do in Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor has some really ambitious, if you haven't seen it, really ambitious carbon goals, GHG emission reduction goals, and they're really pushing the envelope hard down there. Good on them. Well, I don't see any more questions in our box. Does anybody feel like we've left any stone unturned and need to
Well, I'd like to
talk
thank
about anything
everybody
more?
for participating. This is John Sarver. And again, if you do have any further questions for me, feel free to send me an email at johnsarver3@gmail.com. I'd be happy to try to help in any way that I could.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Pat. Thank you again to the East Lansing Public Library for having this virtual event. I miss seeing books, but that's okay. Thank you again for everybody. And thanks for the Capillary Community Foundation, the Board of Water and Life for being a partner. I wish everybody a pleasant, safe, healthy evening. Thank you.